In the quiet corridors of a modest nursing home in North Carolina, where the afternoon sun cast long shadows through half-drawn curtains, lived a man who had once shaped the future of basketball without even knowing it. His name was Clifton "Pop" Herring, and on most days he could be found sitting in his favorite chair by the window, watching the world go by with eyes that had seen greatness before anyone else did. The year was 2023, and while the world celebrated Michael Jordan's latest philanthropic ventures and business successes, Pop Herring's daily routine remained unchanged. The nurses knew him as the gentle soul in room 23, not as the man who had once made a decision that would change basketball history forever. They didn't know that decades ago, his belief in a skinny sophomore would help forge the greatest basketball player of all time. It was Rowan Blair, a young sports journalist working on what he thought would be another ordinary story about Jordan's early years, who first made the connection. He had been digging through old high school records, yearbooks, and newspaper clippings when he discovered something that made his heart skip a beat. Pop Herring, Michael Jordan's first high school basketball coach, the man who had given him his first real chance, was living in near anonymity in a nursing home just a few hours away from where it all began. The story might have ended there. Another interesting footnote in the vast anthology of Jordan lore, but fate had other plans. When the article reached the desk of Elias Kane, one of Jordan's closest confidants, everything changed. Kane had been with Jordan through championships, losses, comebacks, and business ventures, but he had never seen his friend's expression shift quite like it did when he mentioned Pop Herring's current situation. "Pop's in a nursing home?" Jordan's voice had carried a weight that Kane hadn't heard in years. "The man who saw something in me when I was nothing but a scrawny kid with big dreams." The memories came flooding back. The summer of 1978, the disappointment of being cut from the varsity team as a sophomore, and Pop Herring's words that would echo through time. "Michael, use this. Let it fuel you. Show everyone what I already see in you." In the following days, Jordan's team quietly began gathering information. They learned that Pop had fallen on hard times, that his health had declined, and that the nursing home, while adequate, was far from comfortable. They discovered that the man who had helped launch one of the greatest careers in sports history was living on a modest pension, his contributions to basketball largely forgotten by all but a few. The nurses at Pine Grove Care Center noticed something different about Pop that week. He seemed more animated, sharing stories about his coaching days with anyone who would listen. "I had this kid," he would say, his eyes lighting up with the memory. "Skinny as a rail, but with a fire in his eyes like you wouldn't believe. A day after practice, he'd stay late working on his jump shot until the janitor had to kick him out." What Pop didn't know was that across town, in a sleek office overlooking the city, Michael Jordan was sitting at his desk looking at old photographs. One in particular caught his eye. A team photo from Laney High School with a young Pop Herring standing proudly beside his players. Jordan's finger traced the outline of his former coach's face, remembering the man who had seen past his physical limitations to the champion within. "We're going to do something about this," Jordan announced to his team, "and we're going to do it right." The plan came together quickly but deliberately. Jordan knew that simply writing a check, while helpful, wouldn't be enough. This needed to be more than just financial assistance. It needed to be a recognition of Pop Herring's impact on not just his life, but on the very fabric of basketball history. As Jordan's team worked behind the scenes, life at Pine Grove continued its quiet routine. Pop still sat by his window, still shared his stories with anyone who would listen, unaware that the skinny kid he had once coached was about to change his life just as he had once changed Jordan's. The seeds of what would become one of the most touching stories in sports history were being planted. Jordan's team worked tirelessly, coordinating with medical professionals, facilities managers, and legal experts. They weren't just planning a visit or a donation, they were orchestrating a complete transformation of Pop's quality of life. Meanwhile, the nursing home staff began noticing small changes. New medical equipment appeared. The quality of meals improved. The facility's recreation room was mysteriously upgraded. None of them could have guessed that these were just the beginning, the quiet before a storm of kindness that would soon break records and headlines. In his room, Pop Herring continued his daily routine, occasionally sharing stories about the skinny kid who wouldn't quit, the one who turned disappointment into determination. Some people see failure as the end, he would tell the nurses during their rounds, but that boy, he saw it as a beginning. He couldn't have known how prophetic those words would prove to be, not just for Jordan's career, but for what was about to unfold in his own life. The wheels were in motion for a reunion that would remind the world of the power of gratitude, the importance of remembering one's roots, and the lasting impact of believing in someone before they believe in themselves. As Jordan finalized his plans, he thought back to those early days at Laney High School. He remembered the sting of being cut from the varsity team, but more importantly, he remembered Pop's unwavering faith in his potential. "This isn't the end, Michael," Pop had told him then. "This is just your beginning." Now, decades later, Jordan was preparing to show his first coach that his own story wasn't over either. The man who had helped shape the beginning of Jordan's legendary journey was about to experience a new beginning of his own. In the quiet of his office, Jordan looked at the old team photo one more time. "You saw something in me when no one else did, Coach," he whispered to the image. "Now it's my turn to show everyone what I see in you." The stage was set for a reunion that would not only change Pop Herring's life, but would also remind the world that greatness often begins with someone simply believing in you. The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring was about to add another chapter, one that would prove that some bonds transcend time, success, and even memory itself. As the sun set on another quiet day at Pine Grove Care Center, Pop Herring had no idea that his world was about to change. The man who had once helped launch the career of basketball's greatest player was about to experience firsthand the power of the ripples we create when we believe in others. Jordan's team had everything in place. The paperwork was ready, the arrangements were made, and the plan was set in motion. All that remained was to reveal to Pop Herring that the skinny kid he had once believed in had never forgotten him, and was about to show the world exactly why. First coaches matter. Pine Grove Care Center stood at the edge of town, a 3-story brick building that had seen better days. The facility housed 68 residents, each with their own story, their own path that had led them there, but none quite like Pop Herring's. In the days following Jordan's discovery of his former coach's whereabouts, the basketball legend found himself increasingly drawn to memories of his time at Laney High School. He remembered the squeak of sneakers on the gymnasium floor, the rhythmic bounce of basketballs during practice, and most vividly, Pop's voice echoing off the walls, always encouraging, always pushing his players to be better than they thought they could be. The nursing home's daily routine continued unchanged. Every morning at 7, Nova Wren, one of the longtime nurses, would make her rounds, starting with room 23. She had grown fond of Pop over the years, always taking a few extra minutes to listen to his stories about his coaching days. She noticed how his eyes would light up when he talked about basketball, though she had never quite grasped the significance of the tales he told. "You know," Pop would say to her, adjusting his position in his chair by the window, "there's nothing quite like seeing potential in someone before they see it. In themselves, it's like holding a diamond in the rough. You know what it could become with just a little polish." Nova would smile and nod, not realizing she was hearing first-hand accounts of the early days of one of sport's greatest legends. To her, Pop was just another resident, albeit one with particularly engaging stories about his past. The facility's recreation room, recently upgraded thanks to Jordan's quiet intervention, had become Pop's favorite afternoon spot. He would sit there for hours, watching the small television mounted on the wall, occasionally commenting on basketball games to anyone who would listen. When college games were on, he would analyze the players' forms and techniques, his coaching instincts still sharp after all these years. Meanwhile, across town, Jordan sat in his office, poring over old newspaper clippings and yearbooks. His assistant, Iris Lennox, had spent days gathering everything she could find about Pop Herring's coaching career. The yellowed pages told a story of dedication, of a man who had devoted his life to developing young talent, not just in basketball, but in life. One particular article caught Jordan's attention. Dated 1978, it covered the Laney High School basketball team's season. There was a quote from Pop that made Jordan's throat tight. "Success isn't about natural talent. It's about the fire inside. I've got a sophomore who got cut from varsity, but mark my words, that kid's got a fire that's going to change the game someday." Jordan remembered that year vividly. The disappointment of being cut had been crushing, but Pop had been there, turning what could have been a moment of defeat into the foundation of greatness. "Michael," he had said, pulling him aside after he'd seen the roster, "this isn't a no, this is a not yet." As Jordan's team continued their preparations, they discovered more about Pop's current situation. The nursing home, while providing basic care, was struggling with limited resources. The staff did their best, but the facility needed updates, better medical equipment, and more recreational activities for its residents. Delilah Wynn, the facility's administrator, had been surprised by the sudden interest in Pop Herring. When Jordan's representatives first contacted her, she had been skeptical. But as the plans unfolded, she began to understand the magnitude of what was happening. "Pop talks about his coaching days all the time," she told Jordan's team during one of their meetings. "But we never knew he had such an impact on someone like Michael Jordan." The reality of Pop's situation became clearer as Jordan's team dug deeper. They learned that he had never sought recognition for his role in Jordan's early development. Even as Jordan's star rose, Pop had remained humble, continuing to coach and mentor young players until health issues forced him to retire. In the nursing home's small library, where Pop often spent his mornings, there was a shelf of sports books. Among them was a biography of Michael Jordan, its pages worn from frequent reading. The staff had noticed how Pop would sometimes open it, pointing to certain passages and smiling, but he never boasted about his connection to the story within. Its pages. Jordan's plan was coming together, but he wanted to ensure it would have lasting impact. It wasn't just about improving Pop's immediate situation. It was about creating a legacy that would honor all those coaches who saw potential in young athletes and helped shape their futures. Cassius Hale, Jordan's legal advisor, worked tirelessly to structure the assistance in a way that would provide long-term security for Pop, while also benefiting the entire facility. "This isn't just about one coach," Jordan had insisted. "It's about recognizing all the Pop Herrings out there who believe in kids before they believe in themselves." As the pieces fell into place, the story began to spread quietly through basketball circles. Other former players and coaches who remembered Pop reached out, sharing their own stories of his impact. Each account reinforced Jordan's conviction that this gesture needed to be more than just a generous act. It needed to be a statement about the importance of mentorship and belief in young talent. In room 23, unaware of the changes about to unfold in his life, Pop continued his daily routine. He would wake early, watch the sunrise from his window, and spend his days sharing wisdom with anyone who would listen. "Basketball," he would say, "is just like life. It's not about how many times you get knocked down. It's about how many times you get back up." The nurses noticed subtle changes in the facility. New equipment appeared in the physical therapy room. The meals improved. Small renovations began in common areas, but these were just the beginning, the quiet precursor to what Jordan had planned. Aurora James, one of the younger nurses, found herself increasingly drawn to Pop's stories. She would listen during her breaks as he described coaching techniques and life lessons learned on the basketball court. "There was this one player," he would say, his voice taking on a special warmth, "who taught me that sometimes the greatest talent isn't the most obvious." Jordan, meanwhile, struggled with how to make the revelation to his former coach. He wanted it to be personal, meaningful, but not overwhelming. He remembered how Pop had always emphasized dignity and respect in victory as much as in defeat. This moment needed to reflect those values. The plan would unfold in stages. First, ensuring Pop's immediate comfort and care, then establishing a foundation that would support not just Pop, but other retired coaches who had made similar impacts on young athletes' lives. Finally, a personal reunion that would remind the world of the power of believing in someone's potential. As the sun set on another day at Pine Grove, Pop sat in his usual spot by the window. He held a basketball in his lap, his fingers tracing the seams as they had thousands of times before. Outside, the world was changing, preparing to recognize his contributions in ways he couldn't imagine. In his office, Jordan looked at the final details of the plan. Everything was in place. Soon the world would know the story of Pop Herring, the coach who saw greatness in a skinny sophomore and helped set him on the path to becoming a legend. But more importantly, Pop himself would know that his legacy lived on, that his belief in others had created ripples that would continue to impact lives for generations to come. The stage was set for a reunion that would do more than just make headlines. It would remind everyone of the power of believing in someone's potential and the lasting impact one person's faith can have on the world. For Pop Herring, the next sunrise would mark the beginning of a new chapter, one that would finally recognize the role he played in shaping one of basketball's greatest stories. The morning everything began to change started like any other at Pine Grove Care Center. The early spring sun cast long shadows across Pop Herring's room as Juniper Cross, the morning shift nurse, made her usual rounds. But today, something was different. There was an energy in the air, an almost imperceptible shift that even Pop seemed to notice. "Something feels different today," Pop mentioned to Juniper as she checked his vital signs. His weathered hands rested on the arms of his chair, the same chair where he'd spent countless hours watching the world go by. "Reminds me of game day, back when I was coaching. You could always feel it in the air." What Pop didn't know was that several miles away, Michael Jordan was sitting in his car, parked outside his office, gathering his thoughts. In his hands, he held an old Laney High School yearbook, open to a page that showed a much younger Pop Herring standing proudly with his team. Jordan's finger traced the edge of the photograph, remembering the moment it was taken. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of quiet preparation. Jordan's team, led by the efficient Ophelia Blair, had orchestrated a series of subtle improvements. To Pine Grove, new medical equipment had appeared, staff training programs had been enhanced, and the quality of life for all residents had begun to improve. But these changes were just the foundation for what was to come. Dante Wolf, Jordan's security chief, had spent days coordinating with the facility's management to ensure that when the time came, everything would proceed smoothly. The media would need to be managed carefully. This wasn't meant to be a circus, but rather a dignified reunion between a coach and his former player. Inside Pine Grove, the staff had noticed Pop spending more time than usual sharing his old coaching stories. It was as if something had awakened these memories in him, bringing them to the surface with newfound clarity. "You see," he told Rowan Steele, a young orderly who had become one of his favorite listeners, "coaching isn't just about teaching someone to play basketball. It's about teaching them to believe in themselves. Sometimes all it takes is one person seeing what others don't." In Jordan's office, the final details of the plan were coming together. The legal team had prepared documents establishing the Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation, an organization that would not only ensure Pop's comfort for the rest of his life, but would also support other retired coaches who had made similar impacts on young athletes. Ezra Whitman, Jordan's longtime financial advisor, had worked tirelessly to structure the foundation in a way that would create lasting change. "This isn't just about one coach," Jordan had insisted during their planning meetings. "It's about recognizing all those who dedicate their lives to believing in young talent." The morning grew into afternoon, and Pop made his way to the recreation room, now equipped with a new television and comfortable furniture, anonymous gifts that had appeared over the past few weeks. He settled into his favorite spot, watching a college basketball game with keen interest. "See that player there?" he said to anyone who would listen, pointing to a young athlete making a difficult shot. "That's all about confidence. You can teach technique all day long, but confidence? That comes from knowing someone believes in you." Jordan's car pulled into the Pine Grove parking lot just as the sun reached its peak. He sat there for a moment, his hands gripping the steering wheel, remembering the last time he had seen Pop. It had been years ago, at a high school reunion he had briefly attended. Pop had been there, still coaching, still believing in young players who needed someone to see their potential. Inside the facility, Thea Whitman, the activities director, was gathering residents for what they had been told would be a special afternoon program. Pop took his usual seat, not knowing that his life was about to change forever. Jordan walked through the front doors, accompanied by Dante Wolfe and Ophelia Blair. The staff, who had been briefed about what was about to happen, tried to contain, and their excitement. This wasn't just about a famous athlete visiting a nursing home. This was about a student returning to thank the teacher who had helped shape his future. In his pocket, Jordan carried a letter he had written to Pop, explaining everything that was about to happen. He had rewritten it dozens of times, trying to find the right words to express what Pop's belief in him had meant all those years ago. The recreation room was filling up now. Pop sat in his usual spot, watching the basketball game, occasionally commenting on the players' techniques. He didn't notice when the room gradually grew quieter or when the other residents began to pay more attention to the doorway than the television. Jordan paused outside the recreation room, taking a deep breath. Through the doorway, he could see Pop, still analyzing the game, still teaching anyone who would listen. Some things never changed. Zara Monroe, one of the longest-serving nurses at Pine Grove, had known Pop for years. She stood near the back of the room, watching as history was about to unfold. She had heard all of Pop's stories about the skinny sophomore who wouldn't quit, but she had never imagined she would witness their reunion. The television suddenly went quiet. Pop looked up, confused by the sudden silence. And then, in the doorway, stood Michael Jordan. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Pop's eyes widened as recognition dawned on his face. Jordan took a step forward, then another, his eyes never leaving his former coach. "Coach Herring," Jordan's voice carried across the now silent room. "I've been looking for you." Pop's hands gripped the arms of his chair, his eyes glistening with sudden tears. "Michael?" His voice wavered slightly. "Is that really you?" Jordan crossed the room in long strides, kneeling beside Pop's chair. "It's me, Coach, the skinny sophomore who couldn't make varsity. Remember what you told me back then?" Pop's voice grew stronger, the memory crystal clear. "I told you it wasn't a no, it was a not yet." The room remained silent as Jordan reached into his pocket and pulled out the letter. Coach, I've been thinking about those words a lot lately. About how sometimes it takes just one person believing in you to change everything. Pop's hands trembled slightly as he took the envelope. Around them, residents and staff watched in awed silence as one of basketball's greatest legends knelt beside his first coach. Both men transported back to a high school gym where their story had begun. You saw something in me when nobody else did, Jordan continued, his voice thick with emotion. You turned what could have been the end of my basketball dreams into the beginning of everything. And now, Coach, it's my turn to show you what I see in you. As Pop opened the letter, Jordan stood and addressed the room. He explained about the improvements that had already been made to the facility, about the foundation being established. In Pop's name, about the legacy that would continue to impact young athletes for generations to come. But Pop wasn't listening to the details. He was looking at Jordan's face, seeing not the global icon, but the determined young player who had stayed after practice every day, working to prove himself worthy of someone's belief in him. Michael, Pop's voice cut through Jordan's explanation. You didn't have to do all this. Jordan turned back to his former coach, his expression serious. Yes, coach, I did. Because what you gave me wasn't just about basketball. You taught me that believing in yourself starts with someone else believing in you first. The afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting long shadows across the recreation room floor. In that moment, everyone present understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. Not just a generous act by a famous athlete, but the completion of a circle that had begun decades ago in a high school gymnasium. The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring was about to take on new life, inspiring a new generation to understand the power of belief and the lasting impact of a mentor's faith in their potential. But for now, in that quiet room in Pine Grove Care Center, it was simply about a coach and his player, reunited by gratitude and respect that had stood the test of time. The news of Michael Jordan's visit to Pine Grove Care Center spread through the basketball world like wildfire. But within the facility's walls, something more profound was taking place. The day after the reunion, Pop Herring sat in his room, reading and rereading the letter Jordan had given him, each word cementing the reality of what had transpired. Freya Bell, the morning nurse who had known Pop for years, noticed an immediate change in him. The usual quiet dignity that surrounded him had been joined by something else, a renewed sense of purpose. As she brought his morning medication, she found him surrounded by old newspaper clippings that Jordan had brought, carefully arranging them in a leather-bound album. You know, Pop said, looking up from his memorabilia, success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you inspire others to become. His fingers traced the edges of a yellowed photograph showing a young Michael Jordan at basketball. In practice, I never coached for recognition. I coached because I believed in potential. Down the hall, in the administrator's office, Delilah Wynn was meeting with Jordan's team. The changes that had been quietly implemented over the past few weeks were just the beginning. The Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation was about to transform not just Pine Grove, but the lives of retired coaches across the country. Kieran Hart, the foundation's newly appointed director, laid out the vision. We're not just creating a comfortable retirement for Coach Herring, he explained. We're establishing a system to identify and support coaches who've made similar impacts on young athletes' lives. Pop's story is the catalyst, but this is about recognizing all those who dedicate their lives to believing in young talent. Back in Pop's room, the morning sunlight illuminated decades of memories spread across his bed. Each photograph, each newspaper clipping told part of a story that was still being written. Jordan had left him with more than just memorabilia. He'd given him a new chapter, Aurora James stopped by during her rounds, finding Pop deep in conversation with Rowan Steele about his coaching philosophy. "The secret," he was saying, his voice stronger than it had been in months, "isn't in teaching them how to play, it's in teaching them how to believe." The recreation room where the reunion had taken place just yesterday had become a gathering point for residents eager to hear Pop's stories. Now, they weren't just listening to tales about a skinny sophomore, they were hearing first-hand accounts of how belief and determination could shape destinies. Lennox Ford, one of the younger residents, had been particularly moved by the reunion. A former high school coach himself, he found in Pop's story a reflection of his own life's work. "We never know which student might become the next Michael Jordan," he said during lunch. "That's why we have to believe in all of them." Jordan's impact continued to ripple through Pine Grove. The facility's staff noticed residents sharing their own stories of mentorship and belief, of moments when someone's faith in them had changed their lives. What had started as one man's gesture of gratitude was becoming a catalyst for collective reflection on the power of believing in others. In his office across town, Jordan was reviewing the Foundation's initial projects with Ophelia Blair. The first phase would focus on improving facilities like Pine Grove, ensuring that retired coaches could live with dignity. The second phase would establish mentorship programs, connecting experienced coaches with young athletes who needed guidance. Pop never sought recognition, Jordan explained to his team. He just believed in his players and gave them the confidence to believe in themselves. That's what this foundation needs to perpetuate. Back at Pine Grove, Pop had begun keeping a journal. Juniper Cross found him writing in it during her afternoon rounds, his pen moving steadily across the pages. "I'm recording everything I remember about coaching," he explained. "Not just the techniques, but the moments when believing in someone made all the difference." The Foundation's work was already taking shape. Dante Wolfe coordinated with facility management to plan improvements that would benefit all residents. New physical therapy equipment arrived, activity programs were enhanced, and the quality of daily life began to visibly improve. But the most significant changes were the intangible ones. Pop's presence in the facility had transformed from that of a quiet resident to a living testament to the power of mentorship. Other residents began sharing their own stories of teaching, coaching, and believing in others. Celeste Quinn, a retired teacher who lived down the hall from Pop, spent an afternoon sharing stories with him about students she had helped believe in themselves. "It's amazing," she said, "how similar teaching and coaching can be. It's all about seeing potential and nurturing it." Jordan made regular calls to check on Pop, their conversations ranging from basketball strategy to life lessons. Each call reinforced the bridge between past and present, between the coach who had believed and the player who had never forgotten. The media attention was carefully managed, respecting Pop's privacy while sharing the story in a way that would inspire others. Phoenix Wilder, Jordan's PR director, worked to ensure that the focus remained on the message rather than the spectacle. The lasting impact of belief and mentorship. In the facility's garden, where Pop now spent part of each afternoon, he would often gather with other residents to watch basketball games on a newly installed outdoor television. His commentary had evolved, focusing less on technical aspects and more on the mental game, on the importance of confidence and self-belief. The Foundation's work extended beyond Pine Grove's walls. Other facilities began receiving support, other retired coaches were identified and honored. The ripple effect of Jordan's gesture was creating waves of positive change throughout the sports community. Nova Wren, observing Pop during her shifts, noticed how he had begun greeting new residents with particular warmth, especially those who seemed uncertain or afraid. "Everyone needs someone to believe in them," he would say. "Sometimes they just need to be reminded of their own strength." The story reached the basketball world. inspiring current coaches to reflect on their roles in their players' lives. Letters began arriving at Pine Grove from coaches and players across the country, sharing their own stories of mentorship and belief. Iris Lennox, managing the foundation's correspondence, was moved by the response. "What started as one man's gratitude has become a movement," she observed. "It's reminding people of the power they have to change lives simply by believing in someone's potential." Pop's room gradually transformed into a living museum of basketball. History, not just of Jordan's career, but of all the lives he had touched through coaching. Photos of former players lined the walls, their success stories intertwining with the larger narrative of belief and perseverance. The foundation established the Pop Herring Excellence in Coaching Award, recognizing high school coaches who demonstrated extraordinary commitment to developing not just athletes, but confident, resilient young people. As spring turned to summer, Pine Grove buzzed with new energy. The facility had become more than just a nursing home. It was now a place where stories of belief and transformation were celebrated and shared. Pop's presence had catalyzed a community-wide appreciation for the power of mentorship. Jordan's regular visits became opportunities for him to learn even more from his first coach. They would spend hours discussing not just basketball, but life, leadership, and the responsibility that comes with believing in others. "You know, Michael," Pop said during one such visit, "what you're doing with this foundation, it's exactly what coaching is all about. You're seeing potential and helping it grow. You learned that lesson well." The impact of their reunion continued to expand, touching lives far beyond the walls of Pine Grove. It was a reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements aren't measured in points scored or games won, but in the lives changed by someone's unwavering belief. As summer evenings lengthened, Pop would often sit in his favorite spot by the window, watching the sunset and reflecting on the extraordinary turn his life had taken. But more than the improved facilities or the foundation bearing his name, what moved him most was knowing that his life's work, believing in young people's potential, would continue to impact future generations. The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring had become more than just a tale of gratitude. It had evolved into a testament to the enduring power of belief, mentorship, and the profound impact one person's faith can have on another's destiny. The summer heat had settled over North Carolina when the first group of coaches arrived at Pine Grove. They came from different states, different backgrounds, but they all shared one thing in common. Like Pop Herring, they had spent their lives believing in young athletes' potential. The Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation had identified them as its first honorees, and Jordan had insisted that Pop be part of welcoming them. Zion Ellison, a retired coach from Georgia, was the first to shake Pop's hand. "You didn't just coach, Michael Jordan," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You showed all of us what it means to truly believe in someone." Pop's eyes sparkled with understanding as he greeted each coach, recognizing in them the same dedication he had carried throughout his career. The foundation had transformed Pine Grove's community room into a hall of recognition, with photographs and stories of coaches who had made extraordinary impacts on young athletes' lives. At the center was a large black and white photograph of Pop coaching a young Jordan, both of them intensely focused during a practice session. Elodie Carr, the foundation's program director, had worked tirelessly to create something more than just a display of achievements. "This isn't about wins and losses," she explained to visitors. "It's about moments when a coach's belief changed someone's life trajectory." Jordan himself arrived that afternoon, not with the fanfare of a celebrity, but with the quiet respect of a former player visiting his mentor. He moved through the room, listening to each coach's story, drawing connections between their experiences and his own journey with Pop. "What we're celebrating here," Jordan addressed the gathered coaches, "is the power of seeing potential in others, Coach Herring taught me that lesson, and I see it reflected in each of your stories. The event had drawn attention from the basketball world, but in a way that focused on the deeper message. Cambria Steele, a sports journalist covering the story, found herself moved by the intimacy of the gathering. "This isn't about basketball," she wrote in her notes. "It's about the human connection that changes lives." Pop, sitting in his place of honor, listened as coach after coach shared stories of players they had mentored, of moments when their belief had helped someone overcome doubt or adversity. Each story seemed to energize him, adding to the legacy he had begun decades ago in a high school gym. Riverbell, one of Pop's former players who had become a coach himself, spoke about how Pop's influence had shaped his own coaching style. "He taught us that coaching isn't just about developing athletes," River explained. "It's about developing belief." The foundation's impact was already extending beyond Pine Grove. Similar programs were being established at other facilities across the country, creating spaces where retired coaches could continue sharing their wisdom and inspiring others. Sage Delaney, watching from the back of the room, remembered her first days as Pop's nurse at Pine Grove. "He always had that special way about him," she reflected. "Even before all this, he was teaching and inspiring people. Now he just has a bigger classroom." Jordan had arranged for the event to be filmed, not for publicity, but to preserve these stories for future generations of coaches and athletes. The documentary would become part of the Foundation's educational program, showing young coaches the profound impact they could have on their players' lives. Throughout the afternoon, Pop shared his own philosophy of coaching with the gathered audience. "Success in coaching isn't measured by championships," he said, his voice carrying the weight of experience. "It's measured by the number of lives you touch, the number of people you help believe in themselves." The Foundation had also begun a mentorship program, pairing experienced coaches with young athletes who needed guidance. Pop had insisted on being involved despite his age, offering wisdom accumulated over decades of coaching. Dahlia Rhodes, a high school basketball player who had been paired with Pop through the program, sat next to him during the event. "He still sees things in people that they don't see in themselves," she observed. "That's what makes him special." As the afternoon progressed, Jordan announced the Foundation's next phase, the establishment of coaching clinics that would focus not just on basketball techniques, but on the mental and emotional aspects of developing young athletes. "What Coach Herring taught me wasn't just about basketball," Jordan explained. "He taught me about confidence, about turning setbacks into motivation, about believing in myself when others didn't. That's what these clinics will teach." The impact of the Foundation's work was beginning to show in unexpected ways. Other professional athletes, inspired by Jordan's gesture, began reaching out to their former coaches and mentors, creating their own programs to support those who had believed in them early in their careers. Pop watched it all with quiet satisfaction, understanding that his legacy would live on not just through Jordan's success, but through every coach who learned to believe in their players' potential. Bryn Carter, one of the Foundation's first scholarship recipients, shared how the program had changed her approach to coaching. "It's not about creating the next Michael Jordan," she said. "It's about being the next Pop Herring, someone who sees potential and nurtures it." The Foundation's work had begun to attract attention from educational institutions as well. Universities were incorporating its principles into their coaching programs, recognizing that the ability to believe in and develop potential was as important as technical knowledge. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through pine groves windows, Jordan gathered everyone for a group photograph. Pop sat in the center, surrounded by coaches whose lives, like his, had been dedicated to believing in young athletes. "This is just the beginning," Jordan announced. "The Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation isn't just about honoring the past. It's about shaping the future of coaching and mentorship." The evening concluded with an informal dinner where coaches shared more stories and began forming connections that would strengthen the foundation's network. Pop moved from table to table, still coaching in his way, still sharing wisdom earned through years of believing in others. Livia Dean, a young coach from California, summed up the day's impact perfectly. What started as one man's gratitude has become a movement. It's reminding us all that sometimes the greatest gift we can give someone is our belief in their potential. As the guests began to leave, Pop sat with Jordan in the quiet of the community room, surrounded by the photos and stories of lives changed by belief and mentorship. "You know, Michael," Pop said, looking at the photograph of their first practice together, "when I told you that getting cut wasn't a no, but a not yet, I believed it with all my heart. But I never imagined it would lead to all this." Jordan smiled, remembering that crucial moment in his journey. That's the thing about belief, coach. You never know how far its impact will reach. The Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation had become more than just a gesture of gratitude. It was now a living testament to the power of belief, a reminder that sometimes the greatest achievements in sports aren't measured in points or championships, but in the lives changed by someone's unwavering faith in their potential. As night fell over Pine Grove, the facility hummed with the energy of possibility. The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring had evolved into something greater than either of them had imagined, a legacy of belief that would continue to change lives for generations to come. As autumn painted the trees around Pine Grove in brilliant hues of red and gold, the impact of Jordan's gesture had grown far beyond its initial scope. The facility had become a pilgrimage site of sorts, not for basketball fans seeking autographs, but for coaches and educators seeking inspiration. Pop Herring's daily routine now included regular sessions with visiting coaches, each eager to learn from the man who had seen greatness in a skinny sophomore all those years ago. Ren Holloway, a former NBA player turned youth coach, sat with Pop one crisp morning, notebook in hand. "I've been coaching for years," he admitted, "but I never fully understood the power of belief until I heard your story." Pop's eyes twinkled as he shared his philosophy, not just about basketball, but about recognizing and nurturing potential. In all its forms, the Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation had expanded beyond its initial mission. What started as a program to support retired coaches had evolved into a comprehensive movement, changing the way coaches approached their role in young athletes' lives. Zara Penrose, the foundation's head of research, had been documenting the ripple effects. "We're seeing a fundamental shift in coaching philosophy," she reported during a board meeting. "Coaches are moving away from purely results-driven approaches to focus more on individual development and building confidence." Jordan's regular visits to Pine Grove had become opportunities for deeper discussions about the nature of mentorship. He and Pop would often sit in the facility's garden, now enhanced with comfortable seating areas and a small basketball court, where residents could watch young players practice. "You know what I've realized, Coach," Jordan said during one such visit. "When you believed in me, you weren't just seeing a potential basketball player, you were seeing a person who needed someone to believe in them." The foundation had begun hosting monthly workshops at Pine Grove, where Pop would share his experiences with groups of coaches from across the country. Maisie Knox, a high school coach from Texas, found herself moved to tears during one session. "Coach Herring talked about looking beyond the obvious talents," she recounted. "He said sometimes the greatest potential lies in the player who's been told they're not good enough. That's when a coach's belief matters most." The facility itself had undergone a remarkable transformation. The Pop Herring Wing, a new addition, funded by the foundation, featured state-of-the-art rehabilitation equipment, comfortable community spaces, and walls lined with inspiring stories of coaches who had changed lives through their belief in others. Thea Whitman, still serving as activities director, noticed profound changes in the residents' attitudes. "They're not just living here anymore," she observed. "They're part of something bigger. They're contributing to a legacy of belief and mentorship." The Foundation's scholarship program had grown exponentially. Young coaches from disadvantaged communities received training, resources, and most importantly, mentorship from experienced coaches who understood the power of belief in transforming lives. Dante Wolfe, who had initially been focused on security, found himself deeply involved in the Foundation's community outreach programs. "What we're protecting now isn't just a facility or a person," he explained. "We're protecting an idea. The idea that belief in someone's potential can change the world." Pop's health had improved markedly since the Foundation's establishment. Doctors attributed it to his renewed sense of purpose. Every day, he would review letters from coaches and players, sharing how his story had inspired them to believe in others or in themselves. One such letter came from Rowan Blair, a coach working with at-risk youth in inner-city Chicago. "Your story taught me that sometimes the kids who need our belief the most are the ones who seem least likely to succeed," he wrote. "Yesterday, I had a player who reminded me of what you saw in Michael. Not the talent, but the determination to prove themselves worthy of someone's faith." The Foundation's impact extended beyond basketball. Educators, business leaders, and mentors in various fields began adopting its principles. Aurora James, who had transitioned from nursing to running the Foundation's healthcare program, saw the parallels clearly. "What Pop and Michael showed us isn't just about sports," she explained during a healthcare conference. "It's about the fundamental human need to have someone believe in our potential and the extraordinary things that can happen when that belief is present." Jordan had ensured that the Foundation's work would continue long into the future. A substantial endowment guaranteed that Pop's legacy of belief would influence generations of coaches and mentors. The media attention had evolved from initial coverage of Jordan's generous gesture to in-depth explorations of the Foundation's impact on coaching philosophy and youth development. Kaya Mercer, a documentary filmmaker, spent months capturing the stories of lives changed through the Foundation's work. "What's remarkable," she noted, "is how this single act of gratitude has created a ripple effect of positive change throughout the sports world and beyond." Pop's daily routine now included regular video calls with coaches across the country, sharing his wisdom and experience. Despite his age, his mind remained sharp, particularly when discussing the importance of seeing beyond current limitations to future potential. One morning, as he watched young players practicing on the court outside his window, Pop shared a profound observation with Nova Wren. "You know what's beautiful about all this?" he said, gesturing to the scene below. "These young coaches aren't just learning basketball, they're learning to be believers in human potential." The Foundation had also established the Pop Herring Innovation in Coaching Award, recognizing coaches who developed new ways to build confidence and self-belief in their players. The first recipient was Delilah Wynn, a coach who had created a program specifically for players who had been cut from their school teams. "Pop taught us that getting cut isn't the end of the story," she said in her acceptance speech. "Sometimes it's just the beginning of a greater journey." Jordan's regular involvement in the Foundation's work went far beyond financial support. He personally mentored young coaches, sharing not just basketball knowledge, but the lessons he had learned from Pop about the importance of belief and perseverance. The Foundation's research department, led by Iris Lennox, had begun documenting the measurable impacts of their belief-centered coaching approach. The results were compelling. Players under coaches trained by the foundation showed significant improvements, not just in athletic performance, but in academic achievement and personal confidence. Pop's room at Pine Grove had become a living archive of the foundation's work. Alongside his personal memorabilia were countless letters, photographs, and stories from coaches and players whose lives had been touched by the foundation's mission. One wall featured a quote that Pop had first shared with Jordan during those early high school days. "Talent is common. What's rare is the courage to follow it into the dark places where it leads, and the belief that someone will be there to light the way." As winter approached, the foundation announced its most ambitious project yet, the establishment of coaching centers in underserved communities across the country. Each center would embody Pop's philosophy of seeing and nurturing potential in every young athlete. Jordan, speaking at the announcement ceremony, summed up the foundation's impact. "What started as my way of saying thank you to Coach Herring has become something far greater. It's become a movement that reminds us all of the power we have to change lives simply by believing in someone's potential." Pop, listening from his seat of honor, smiled quietly. His legacy would live on not just through Jordan's achievements, but through every coach who learned to see potential where others saw limitations. Through every player who found the confidence to believe in themselves because someone else believed in them first. The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring had transcended basketball to become a testament to the transformative power of belief. A reminder that sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is our unwavering faith in their potential. 1 year after Michael Jordan's first visit to Pine Grove Care Center, the facility hosted a celebration that would mark both an ending and a beginning. The occasion was Pop Herring's birthday, but it had become something much more, a celebration of belief, mentorship, and the extraordinary power of seeing potential in others. Lyra Stone, now the executive director of the Pop Herring Coaching Legacy Foundation, stood in the transformed community center, watching as coaches, players, and dignitaries from across the country filled the room. The foundation's first year had exceeded everyone's expectations, touching thousands of lives and reshaping the landscape of sports mentorship. Pop sat in his customary place of honor, his eyes bright as he greeted each arrival. He wore a custom-made jacket with the foundation's logo, a simple design featuring a basketball and a rising star, symbolizing the potential within every young athlete. "You've started something remarkable," Beckett Shaw, a renowned sports psychologist, told Pop during the celebration. "Your story has changed how we think about coaching and mentorship." Pop's response was characteristic of his humble nature. "I just believed in someone who needed believing in. The remarkable part is what they do with that belief." Jordan arrived without fanfare, carrying a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. He made his way through the crowd to Pop's side, the same way he had done countless times during practice all those years ago. "Coach," Jordan said, his voice carrying across the now quiet room, "I brought you something." Inside the package was a basketball, but not just any basketball. It was the one from their first practice together, the one Pop had used to demonstrate proper shooting form to a skinny sophomore who couldn't make varsity. "I kept it all these years," Jordan explained, "because it reminded me that sometimes the most important moment in your life doesn't look important at all when it's happening." The foundation's impact had spread far beyond basketball. Eden Locke, an education researcher, had documented how the Pop Herring method of believing in potential was being adapted for classrooms, businesses, and community programs across the country. "What we've learned," she shared during her presentation, "is that belief in someone's potential isn't just about sports. It's about human development at its most fundamental level." The celebration included video messages from coaches and players worldwide who had been influenced by the Foundation's work. Each story shared a common thread: the transformative power of having someone believe in you before you believe in yourself. Silas Drake, a coach from a small town in Minnesota, shared how the Foundation's programs had helped him save his struggling basketball program. "We didn't just teach basketball," he explained. "We taught belief, and that changed everything." Pop listened to each story with tears in his eyes, understanding that his legacy would live on through every life touched by the Foundation's work. The skinny sophomore he had believed in had not only become a basketball legend, but had also ensured that the power of belief would continue to transform lives for generations to come. Jordan took the podium to make an announcement that would secure the Foundation's future. "Today, we're establishing the Pop Herring Endowment," he declared. "This billion-dollar fund will ensure that Coach Herring's philosophy of belief and mentorship will continue to change lives long after we're gone." The room erupted in applause, but Pop remained characteristically humble. When asked to speak, he slowly rose from his chair, supported by Jordan's steady hand. "You know," he began, his voice strong despite his age, "people keep talking about my legacy, but a legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about what you pass forward. Every time a coach believes in a player who needs it, every time someone sees potential where others see limitations, that's not my legacy. That's the power of belief doing what it's always done, changing lives." The Foundation had already begun work on its next phase. Ophelia Blair presented plans for the Pop Herring Coaching Academy, a state-of-the-art facility that would train coaches not just in basketball techniques, but in the art of nurturing potential and building confidence. As the evening drew to a close, Jordan and Pop found themselves alone for a moment in the quiet of Pop's room. The walls, once bare, now told a story of lives transformed through belief and mentorship. "You know, Michael," Pop said, looking at the old basketball Jordan had brought, "when I told you that getting cut wasn't the end, I believed it. But I never imagined we'd be here, talking about how that moment would help so many others believe in themselves." Jordan smiled, remembering the young player he had been and the coach who had seen beyond his limitations. "That's the thing about belief, Coach. It grows. What you gave me wasn't just confidence in my basketball skills. You taught me the power of believing in someone else's potential." The Foundation's work had created a ripple effect that continued to spread. Coaches trained in the Pop Herring method were reporting not just improved athletic performance from their players, but enhanced self-confidence, academic achievement, and life skills. As the celebration wound down, the facility's residents and staff gathered for one final moment. Juniper Cross, who had watched Pop's journey from quiet resident to inspiring mentor, led everyone in a toast. "To Pop Herring," she said, raising her glass, "who taught us that the greatest gift we can give another person is our belief in their potential. And to Michael Jordan, who showed us that gratitude, like belief, has the power to change the world." The story of Michael Jordan and Pop Herring had become more than just a tale of a coach and his player. It had evolved into a movement, a philosophy, and a reminder that sometimes the most powerful force in shaping a life is simply having someone believe in you. As the last guest departed, Pop sat by his window looking out at the basketball court, where young players still practiced, even in the growing darkness. Each bounce of the ball, each shot attempted, carried with it the possibility of greatness, not just in sports, but in life. The legacy of belief that had started in a high school gym decades ago had grown into something far greater than either Pop or Jordan had imagined. It had become a beacon of hope, a reminder that within every person lies potential waiting to be recognized, waiting for someone to say, "I believe in you." And in nursing homes, gymnasiums, classrooms, and communities across the country, that legacy continued to grow, one belief at a time, one life at a time, forever changing the way we think about potential, mentorship, and the extraordinary power of believing in someone before they believe in themselves.